if you are a busy working professional woman and you're really struggling with fatigue and you want to figure out what is going on, maybe you're going to go to the doctor and you want to have some labs done to see, what might be the cause of your fatigue. Today, I'm going to tell you the labs that you should ask for from your doctor in order to get to the root, get to the cause, and see what's really going on.
Welcome to She's Healthy, a podcast for ambitious women on their journey to become the healthiest version of themselves. I'm your host, Lori Aikman.
All right, welcome back to the She is Healthy podcast. If this is your first time to the podcast, welcome. My name is Lori Aikman. I am a nurse practitioner with a passion for functional medicine. I am the founder and CEO of Crown Executive Health, where we help busy professional women regain and sustain their energy so that they can live and enjoy the life that they've worked so hard for. If that's you, you've gotten to a point where you've been grinding, you're at a point, you're, successful in your career, but maybe it's taken a toll on your body, this podcast is for you. I do have to give you my medical disclaimer before we dive in. I am a nurse practitioner, but this podcast, of course, is for informational purposes only. So I do recommend that you take this information and then work with your doctor, your practitioner, before you make any changes to your health plan. This podcast does not constitute, specific medical advice. So, all right, let's dive in. If you are watching today, I just want to say, because these episodes go up on YouTube, you'll notice I'm not in my office today and I have this lovely gray background behind me. So I apologize if the video quality isn't as good today. We are just recording on the go today. All right, so you're having fatigue, you're struggling with fatigue. What is going on? Maybe you're going to go, I saw this all the time. Just a little background on me. If this is, your first time listening to this podcast, I am a family practice nurse practitioner. I worked for many, many years in the hospital, and then I transitioned to outpatient back in 2017, which I can't believe that's like 70 years ago now, right? That it's 2024. And I saw this all the time. Women coming in, struggling with fatigue, struggling with hormonal, I don't know how many women were like, can you test my hormones? Can you test my thyroid? What about my vitamin levels? There must be an answer, right? You might be in that same place where you're like, I don't feel like myself. I've got to get to the bottom of this. So, I will tell you that led me as a clinician to find functional medicine, because I did everything I knew to do as in my conventional medicine training taught me. And you might have had this experience too. You might have gone to the doctor, you had labs, and like everything is normal, right? They do all the tests and they're like, yeah, everything looks good. And you feel, it sucks because you feel like, come on, my body doesn't feel the way it used to. It can't be normal. Like, is this all in my head? What's going on? So I want to talk about the lab tests, and these are basic lab tests these are just basic blood tests that you have done at your doctor. This is not any specialty tests. Then the next episode, I'm actually going to talk about the specialty tests that I recommend to have done. So these are like basic blood work, tests that, and you might have some of these done already, that you can ask for your doctor. So the first one we're going to talk about, if you're struggling with fatigue, you might be surprised at this one. I see this all the time. You want to ask for what your blood sugar level is. Okay. So many women are surprised by this. I was actually even surprised by this when I, started getting into functional medicine and just seeing how much, when we look at, I should give this caveat, when we look at functional medicine ranges, we're looking at optimal ranges. So your normal range, let's take blood sugar, your normal range, you go to Quest, LabCorp, whatever lab you go to, they test your fasting blood sugar. It's going to give you a normal range of like 60 to 99. Well, the majority of the population, like upwards of 90% of the population, falls within normal range. Do you think 90% of the population is healthy, right? So when we look at these labs I'm going to give you, were what I'm talking about is actually optimal ranges for these things. So optimal range or a functional range for fasting blood sugar. So we had that 60 to 99. A functional range is actually about 75 to 85. So it's the basic test, but it then is looking at them with a more critical eye. But what I found in literally I don't think I've had a client over the last 2 years in my practice now, off or online, I'm working with busy professional women. I don't think I've had a client who has had an optimal blood sugar and insulin level. And why this is important is because you might not recognize that you're actually you might just feel tired. You're like, I'm okay in the morning, but then in the afternoon, I have this slump, right? How many people have the afternoon energy slump? Well, some of you might actually be having decreases in your blood sugar, and that's what's causing you to feel tired. Okay. So there's 3 tests that I'd love for you to ask for. Some of you might be, if you are healthy on paper, you might be hard pressed to have your doctor order these, or they may tell you things like insurance isn't going to cover this because, you're not overweight or whatever the reason be. But we want to ask for a fasting blood sugar. We want to ask for a hemoglobin A1C. So this is a measure of blood sugar over 90 days. This is a test we use a lot of times to monitor people with diabetes. Because it doesn't show, fasting blood sugar shows what your blood sugar is that day, whereas hemoglobin A1C shows the amount of sugar on your red blood cells, and your red blood cells have a 90-day life cycle. So that's why it gives us a better picture of how well your blood sugar is controlled over those 90 days, okay? More long-term. And then you want to ask for a fasting insulin. This is probably the one that they're going to tell you. I've had this happen with people. I've said, hey, you should have this test done. And my doctor said that, they won't order it. There's no need to, or insurance won't cover it. So a fasting insulin can be really telling. I think of a friend that's a client who we did her, so what we do is we don't go through insurance so that we can order the tests we want to order. And we ordered her fasting blood sugar, hemoglobin A1C, and fasting insulin. Her fasting blood sugar and A1C were actually okay. Her fasting insulin was like 3 times what it should be. So your fasting insulin should be under 10, closer. It's like somewhere from 2 to 6 or 7. Hers was like a 20 or 21. Okay. So that told us that her body was having a hard time managing her blood sugar. And so a lot of her swings, of her energy levels were actually having to do with her blood sugar having, these swings. And we made some changes with her diet. She actually lost quite a bit of weight, and really improved her energy levels a lot during that time too, along with some other things that we did. Okay. So I'm trying to, again, if you're new to this podcast, I try to keep these episodes under 30 minutes max, closer to 20, because I know you're a busy professional woman and you don't have a lot of time, right? So I'm trying to hit you with action-packed, just quick bites that you can take. All right, so we're going to move to the next section. So you probably have heard of this, and this is something your doctor probably would check if you're going in complaining of fatigue, is we want to check you for anemia, okay? And that's something I think a lot of, lay people might know. Oh, okay, well, if you have anemia, you might have fatigue. So what are the tests that they should check for if they do this? So I put 2 tests on here. There's actually a few more that you could check. The number 1 is going to be a complete blood cell count with differential. So a complete blood cell count, right? That's the one that's going to show us whether you're anemic or not. So whether your hemoglobin and hematocrit are low. And so we're looking at hemoglobin and hematocrit and something called the indices. So they're different measurements of the red blood cells, how saturated they are, if they're big, if they're small, things like that. And why that's important is because it's not just you're anemic or you're not anemic. Those indices, like I was saying, that, how big the cells are, small the cells are, how saturated they are or not saturated, can clue us in. So probably a lot of people have heard of iron deficiency. So we actually see where the indices are smaller, right? That we have small, pale red cells when somebody has iron deficiency. Okay. Whereas if somebody has B12 or folate deficiency, you can have bigger indices. So just getting a complete blood cell count with differential can show that. So we can see those changes in the red blood cells, and it can clue us in if there are some vitamin deficiencies without actually just, saying, oh, well, you don't necessarily have to get your folate or your B12 or things checked. You can, of course, if you're working with a practitioner who would do that. The other thing is, of course, we have to think about this through a functional range. So I actually have a patient recently who she has, I'll tell you, she is late 20s. She's a mom of two. She has hypothyroidism. She has Hashimoto's hypothyroidism. She was on Thyroid and she was still struggling with fatigue. She was also having some trouble losing weight. And when we looked at her labs, we were actually able to see, and she had just had labs done with another practitioner. I was able to just look at the labs she had done and look at it from more that functional perspective. We were able to see that she actually had quite a bit of, she had some signs of magnesium deficiency. She had signs of iron deficiency, and she had signs of, I want to say, like she didn't have all the nutrients, right? There were signs that there's some nutrients you need for your thyroid, things like iodine, selenium, those were lacking as well. So we actually just put her on a really great multivitamin, and that increased her energy so much because, again, if conventional approach, you just look at it. She wasn't anemic. Okay. So there was no sign, oh, okay, yeah, let's put you on iron. But when we looked through that functional range, we looked through that functional lens, we were able to see those changes before they were actually showing up as anemia. We were able to put her on just a really potent multivitamin, and that has increased her energy substantially. Okay. So that's just talking about the CBC with differential. Then there's also the other one I would recommend is that it would be like an iron panel or iron study. So it'd be an iron level, like a total iron. Usually they get your iron binding capacity, and then they get something called a ferritin. So what those are showing is how much iron stores you actually have in your body. Another example of somebody with this recently, someone, I don't think she'd mind me saying this. It's actually my sister. She's really struggling with fatigue. She's in that early 50s menopausal range. No anemia on her labs, but her ferritin level was super, super, super low. I mean, like low, 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 low. It should be at least double digits, and hers was single digits, I believe. And just even though, okay, if we just checked, right? If we just checked a CBC, she wasn't anemic. Okay. I think her indices weren't off, but when we looked at the iron studies, we could see that her iron stores were really low. And that was contributing largely to her fatigue and regulating her blood sugar, building up her iron stores, kind of supplementing there, has greatly impacted her energy and her, mood, all those types of things. So backing off of that, we talked about CBC with differential and then iron studies. You could, of course, get B12 and folate, but like I said, if you get the CBC with differential, usually if you have the increase, usually we can tell if there's a need for B12 or folate without actually getting those levels. Okay. All right. I'm going to try and go quickly through the other. I'm already at 14 minutes. So some other things you might want to get so this is a basic test. So if you get a metabolic panel, or even if you get a complete metabolic panel, both those metabolic panels are going to test some of your electrolytes. So this is going to be sodium, potassium, and chloride. Okay, yeah, I'll keep going here. So the section I'm moving into now are signs of adrenal dysfunction. If you've listened to any of my videos or podcasts, or I'm like huge on, I see a ton of adrenal insufficiency in busy working women, busy working moms. And that's something I just am always keeping an eye out for, just because of the population of women that I work with, that they are very in high demand. They've got a lot on their plate and their body is taxed because of it. So one of the things that the adrenal glands regulate is like our hydration, our sodium levels, things like that. So if we check sodium and potassium as well as chloride, and we see variations again in functional ranges, we can see a propensity for some adrenal insufficiency or adrenal dysfunction. This is also known as adrenal fatigue. If any of you have like read anything or heard anything about adrenal fatigue, right? So that can be a big cause of fatigue. So, and then what we're going to do is we can look at a sodium to potassium ratio. There's a certain ratio that these levels should be in. And when we start getting outside of that, I think it's, if I'm not mistaken, I'm blanking right now. It's a lower sodium to potassium ratio can clue us in that there's some adrenal stress going on. I'm not actually giving you guys levels today just because it's like there's covering really so much in this podcast and trying to keep it short. I actually have a little workshop, masterclass, whatever you want to call it, a live virtual workshop coming up, where in our workbook, I'm actually going to give you the levels. So I'll just give a little plug for that right now. We'll put the link for you to sign up. Okay, so backing off of that, some other, we're talking about more the adrenals, adrenal insufficiency, adrenal fatigue. Again, these are some tests that, depending on your doctor, they may or may not do. So you could ask for a morning cortisol level, an AM cortisol, and you could ask for something called a DHEAS. So these are two hormones that are made in the adrenal glands. And we can see changes in the production of these hormones with that adrenal insufficiency, adrenal stress. We can also see changes in the ratio of cortisol to DHEA when there is that clue of, okay, fatigue is coming from the adrenals being taxed. Again, those are more specialty tests. You might be more likely to get your, just depending on your GP, depending on your primary. If you see an endocrinologist, if you see like an OBGYN, excuse me, will a lot of times test a DHEA, especially if they're looking at your other hormone levels. You might be able to get them to do that. But again, it really just depends on your provider. It depends on how, are they old school and they're like not open to the, thinking that these other things could be a problem, or are they a little more progressive? Would kind of depend. It just depends, everybody practices differently is the thing we have to remember. And it's finding a practitioner that is willing to, wants to work with you in the way you want them to, for you to be able to get some of these tests done. Okay. And then the final section of so how many tests have I given you guys so far? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 tests so far. So we're going to talk about 3 more. We are going to talk about thyroid function, right? I was saying that at the beginning. The majority of the women that would come into me when I was in family practice would say, can you test my thyroid? Like, I'm struggling with all these symptoms, this fatigue, fatigue is always, I hear fatigue from literally every woman. And so they would want their thyroid tested. Okay. I would test, I'll tell on myself, back in the day before I was more functionally minded, I did additional training in functional medicine, right? That's not things that we learn in our initial training usually. I would check a lot of times on the labs, you use Quest. There's something called a TSH with a reflex to free T4. What that means is the lab is going to test your TSH. If it's normal, they're not going to do anything else. If they test your TSH and it's below or above the normal range, if it's out of range, then they will reflexively, if that makes sense, check a free T4. Okay. So my guess is, unless you have hypothyroidism, you're not getting anything checked but a TSH, maybe a free T4. Okay. So there's a lot more thyroid hormones that you can get checked, but 3 that I would recommend getting checked is, again, that TSH, that free T4, and then a free T3. Reason being is, okay, so TSH, just to give you a little background, is the hormone that gets signaled from the brain to the thyroid that tells the thyroid to make T4. And then T4 actually gets converted to T3 in your body. And that's where all those vitamins are needed, selenium, iodine, things like that. And then T3 is actually the hormone that then affects the cells of your body. Okay. So what you can see sometimes if some women have like what they call it thyroid conversion syndrome, is where you might have a normal T4, you might have a normal TSH, you might have a normal T4, but you actually have a low T3, you can have hypothyroidism symptoms like fatigue and your hair falling out and feeling cold and things like that. And if we're not checking for that T3, we're going to miss this. Okay. And also what you can see is that when there is some adrenal stress going on here, this can also down-regulate some of the thyroid function. So you can, all these tests we talked about, all these 13 tests now, they really can be, you can have alterations in all of these, but mild, right? So when you're getting it checked on your regular blood test, unless somebody knows to look through a functional range from these things, they may say, again, everything is normal. Okay. So I hope this was helpful for y'all today. Feel free to, write these down. When you go to your doctor, ask for these tests to maybe get what you can get done. I will tell you, you can go do cash pay for labs. You can, I think Quest has where you can even go on the Quest website and you can say, I want this test, this test, this test, and you pay their cash price for it. So there is ways to get around and actually have these things tested, other than, of course, it's getting a practitioner who knows how to interpret these a little differently to then look for answers. But again, I'm going to give my plug quickly at the end here. If this was helpful for you and you want to know more about the levels, you want to know more about, okay, what do you do when you find these things are off? We are hosting next month a workshop. It's going to be a 5-day workshop. It's free. It's virtual. It will be held via Zoom and we'll stream into a Facebook group where each day it's just like 30 minutes. I think we'll be slotted for an hour, but my goal is never to talk for a full hour because I know I'm a busy working mom and, to listen to something for an hour is a big time commitment. But we will have recordings of this, but the workshop is called Exhausted to Energized. And we're going through different little facets each day of what's contributing to your fatigue and then what you can do to fix it. So even if all you do is come to the workshop and you just, watch the workshop videos, you take our playbook and you take the stuff you learned in there, my goal is for that workshop to be more valuable than the last 10 doctor's appointments you went to, right? Or the last book you read. Like I really am trying to just action pack that, or whatever, value pack it, and just provide you a lot of great resources in that. And then of course we will extend an invitation to come and work with us within Crown Executive Health, whether it's in our group coaching program or one-on-one coaching, where we do test these labs, right? And we look at it from a functional perspective, and we give you, protocols to take your body through specifically what it needs. So what I'll do is, as soon as we have that link, I'll put it in the show notes. I'll put it in the comments on YouTube, and you can go ahead and just sign up for that workshop. Again, we're going to be talking more specifics on these labs and the actual values you need to be looking for. So if you love this episode, I'd love it if you tag me on Instagram. I'm at Lori Aikman. And please share this with somebody, if you have coworkers, you have friends that, are busy working women and need to hear this, share this episode with them. All right. Okay. I'll see you in the next episode.